Hey everybody, I have your sample test here, at least the first part of it, and I wanted to go over it in this video before you take your test today. Hopefully you were able to work on this last night. If you missed anything here, hopefully this help clears it up. So for number one, it asked for the value of y, and the statement in the problem says the sum of y and 14 is 5, so that you can see I set up an equation, y plus 14 equals 5, solved for y, and found that y equals -9. Number two asks for the solution of the equation. You should have added 4 to both sides. That gives 21 equals 3x. Dividing both sides by 3 gives answer B of x equals 7. For number three, when it's asking if a certain number is a solution to any of the equations, you're going to plug that number in for each of the equations. Plug it in for y. The only two that it works for are D and F, so plugging -22 in for y in letter D on the left-hand side there gives that -68 is equal to -66 minus 2, and that is true. And also letter F, -22 over 2 is -11, and so when you add -11 plus 8, you do get -3. Number four, you're asked to solve the equation 4m plus 2 equals -3m plus 16. So I added 3m to both sides to give 7m plus 2 equals 16. Subtracting 2 from both sides, 7m equals 14, and then dividing both sides by 7, we get m equals 2. Number five, I set up an equation. So we have two situations here. We have Drew and Stacy. So Drew starts with $48 in his account and adds $8 every week. Stacy starts with more money, $87 in her account, but she takes out $5 every week. And it wants to know how many weeks until they'll have the same amount of money in their savings. So if we set up an equation, each side of the equal sign is a situation. So Drew is on the left and Stacy's on the right. So 48 plus 8W represents Drew, and 87 minus 5W represents Stacy. So when we set these two things equal to each other and we solve for W, we get W equals 3. So we find that it's 3 weeks until they'll have the same amount of money. You can see my work there. If you need to pause the video to check with your work in case you didn't get 3, but you can see adding 5W to both sides, subtracting 48, and then dividing by 13. So I did forget that in this unit we skipped several sections, even though I had Elizabeth tearing all of that out of the workbooks yesterday. So there are a couple of questions on here that aren't going to be on your test because they're from those lessons that we skipped. So number 6 was one of them. I apologize if you struggled at home last night to try to figure these out, thinking that maybe you weren't sure or didn't know the answers to these. That's because we didn't cover this topic. So you get to skip question 6. Moving on to 7, solving the inequality. So I subtracted 2 from both sides and then I divided by -2. Notice that that caused me to flip the sign, and then to get my variable back on the left-hand side, I had to flip the entire statement around to get k is greater than -2. Question 8 is asking you to use that graph, that number line graph, and state whether the statements are true or false, or say yes or no if they're true. So I have yes for all 3 of them. That is x is greater than or equal to -2. It's a closed circle and it's shading to the right. 3 is a solution. If we were to extend this, remember that arrow means that this does go on forever in that direction. So 3 is certainly included in that. And then you're asked if the inequality represents the solution. So I just went ahead and solved the inequality. I subtracted 1 from both sides, and I kind of had to move my work over to the right there, just follow that arrow. Then I multiplied both sides by -2. That got rid of the division, and by multiplying by a negative, we have to flip the symbol. 1 times -2 is -2, so we do get that x is greater than or equal to -2. So yes for all 3. That doesn't happen very often. Number 9 says a square tarp has an area of 64 square feet. What is the length of one side of the tarp? So we just take the square root of 64. We're given the area of a square, and we can find its side length by taking the square root of the area. So square root of 64 is 8. Moving over to 10, the two integers that the square root of 55 falls between are 7 and 8. 7 squared is 49, and 8 squared is 64. For question 11, you can cross off the bottom two. Unfortunately, I forgot to remove those two problems from the test as well, but so you can go ahead and give it a shot and see how you do. But for 11a, yes, the square root of 43 falls between 6 and 7, not between 36 and 49. Remember, that's 6 and 7 squared. So the answers for 11 are yes and then no. And again, you don't have to worry about C and D, and then also question number 12. So again, when you get to your test, there's a question like number 11. You can go ahead and answer C and D, see if you can get them correct, but those two will not count against you. Again, it's just the C and D portion to this question number. And on your test, it's question 5. So just kind of don't panic about that if you're not sure on that C and D there. Okay, hopefully that cleared everything up on your test. You do not have to turn this in. The substitute will stop the whole class at about the 15-minute mark of you working to have you start the test. Please make sure that it's quiet while you're testing. You can have your math notebook out. You can use a calculator. You need a pencil. And when you're finished with this portion of the test, you will pick up the second part of the sample test from the substitute and be working on that. Also remember, we gave Khan Academy in class yesterday, so you have some Khan Academy exercises to complete as well. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me through email. If not, I will see you tomorrow.